Insurance isn't one size fits all. That's why customers have enjoyed Progressive's Name Your Price tool for years now. With the Name Your Price tool, you tell them what you want to pay, and they'll show you options that fit your budget. So whether you're picking out your first policy or just looking for something that works better for you and your family, they make it easy to see your options. Visit Progressive.com. Find a rate that works for you with the Name Your Price tool. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Welcome to Two Peas on a Pod presents Office Hours, our bi-monthly companion show where we continue to explore connection, friendship, and the relationships that shape who we are and who we're becoming. I'm your host, Dr. Miriam Kermeyer, a clinical psychologist, friendship expert, and global speaker on human connection and social support. In today's conversation, I'm sitting down with Fahd Alhattab to discuss friendships with benefits. No, not the benefits that you might be thinking of. We're talking about workplace benefits. That's right. Today, let's get into why making friends at work doesn't have to feel like work and why it is well worth the effort. Fahd Alhattab is a startup workplace expert and leadership strategist. As founder and CEO of Unicorn Labs, he works with fast-growing startups to strengthen team dynamics and help them scale through better leadership. I'm so thrilled to have him join me today. So as always, settle in and get comfortable because we are diving into even more stories, science, and secrets of friendship. I'm Dr. Miriam Kermeyer, and this is Two Peas on a Pod Office Hours. Welcome, Fahd, to Office Hours. I'm so excited that we're having this conversation.
I'm really excited. Is this like your official office hours? Like, are you the professor or doctor and I'm going to come to your office hours?
Think of it less of a professor-student type of a conversation and more of a friendly colleague conversation, sitting down with a nice cup of coffee or beverage of your choice.
Yes. A little, what would you get? I would get a latte, a little vanilla latte, maybe a little chai latte. Sit down, have it in hand.
Okay, got it. I'm having a nice cup of coffee in my favorite mug. Let's actually start off with our friendship meet cute because we had one of my favorite meetings that I have had when meeting new people. We met almost 2 years ago now in Costa Rica when we were there for the annual convention of the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. And we had started to connect and you were telling me a little bit about you and your experience and your history. And as you were telling your story, in effect, I realized that I had heard your story before, but not from you. I had heard you on a different podcast, maybe 2 years prior to that. And for all sorts of reasons, your story stuck with me. I mean, you're such a fantastic storyteller, of course, but it's also a pretty interesting story. And I probably, when realizing that this was you and that I had heard of you before, I probably interrupted you to spoil the punchline out of sheer excitement. And so I'd like to make reparations right now and allow you to share this story of kind of how you came to be, not only in Canada, but also how you came to be the leadership expert that you are. So go ahead, and I promise to keep my mouth shut this time.
No, so the story goes, I mean, our journey to Canada was quite a crazy one for many years until we really took the flight to Canada. But, between 1990 till 1998, my family had been displaced due to the war where Iraq had invaded Kuwait. And so we had lived in several different countries, in several different cities, in a new place that we could find home, that's a new place that we could belong to. That was the goal. That was what we were trying to do. And in 1996, actually, my dad had communicated with my uncle who had moved to Canada in 92. And my uncle was like, you should really try and come here. Like, it's going to be easier for family. It's going to be easier for life. And so in 1996, like, he makes this call. And so my dad applies. And so in 1998, on October 30th, we land in Canada. And like, you're told Canada's got mountains. and rivers and lakes, right? Like this is all you know. And we know nothing about Canada. You don't have the internet, you don't have Google, you don't speak the language. We spoke no English, like little Arab kids just like trying to figure out their way. And I'm one of 6 kids. I got 3 beautiful sisters, 2 brothers. Like we're 6 kids, my 2 parents. We land on October 30th and we land in Montreal. There's no mountains. There's no lakes. There's just cold. Like, and cold people. Like it's, you know, I'm like freezing. I remember that first day we get there and my uncle greets us and he's the only family member we have who's in the country. And we get this little tiny apartment where all 8 of us are going to sleep in there. And we literally just sleeping on the ground on the first day, like trying to make sense of this whole world. Next day comes around, mom and dad, like, we got to go Walmart. We got to go buy stuff for this apartment. Like, got to furnish it. So we spend all day just like gathering things. And by about 5 p.m., we finally get home and we settle in, get everything in. 5:30 p.m., I turn to my brother and I go, hey, we should go check out the neighborhood. Like, we should go check out what Canada's all about. Let's see if there's these rivers and forests and lakes. I'm excited. He goes, yeah. So me and my brother are about to go out. Well, my younger brother says, I'm coming. And my sister says, we're coming. So all 6 of us are about to go out. My parents are like, well, we're coming. So it's 5:30, 5:45 on October 31st. And we walk outside the house. And all we see are little ghosts and goblins running around knocking on people's doors. I turn to my brother. I'm like, is this what Canadians do every night? Like, we are freaking out. We're like, what is this? Like my poor mother, she turned to my dad and was like, what devil worship is this? You don't speak English. You know what there's some sort of incantation. And the adults are like giving them something at the door. There's some sort of sacrifice that's happening. And we're like freaking out. We run back inside and we're watching this. We're like, oh my God, what happens if they come to our door? Like, turn off all the lights. We're not home. Like, we're like, they're knocking on doors. Like, what do you do? I'm like, turn to my younger brother. I'm like, we'll sacrifice you. Like, you're the first to go. Like this. We call my uncle and we're like, what is happening? What's going on? And he's like, no, it's a thing called Halloween. We like don't believe him. Next day, 5 p.m. rolls around. We're waiting at the window, just like waiting for this to happen again. And like we ask him, like, what is this? Like, my mom was like, do they worship the devil? He goes, no, they worship sugar. There's a difference, you know? And that was our like welcome to Canada moment. It was like our first night in Canada, first day to really to the culture shock, but the sort of experience of immigration, I think, is this profound experience where you constantly see different worlds from the same perspective. And I think that's a characteristic that I carry for a very long time into relationships, into leadership, and into the identity making that I have as a young man.
Yeah. It took everything in my power not to interrupt you again. I'm very glad that I didn't, because hearing that story live is such a treat.
Not a trick. Not a trick. Just a treat.
I mean, from there, you have gone on to do so many amazing things in certainly the tech space, in student leadership, and I know we'll get into all of this. So to kind of kick off the conversation, I am really curious to hear from your perspective a little bit about the role of connection at work. And I imagine we're coming at this from 2 different worlds and perspectives, but there's a lot of shared language, I think, and in terms of how we think about this. And I don't know about you, but I've definitely seen the conversation evolve over time in terms of the benefits of feeling connected at work to your colleagues, to the people that you are leading or supporting, feeling connected to the people on your team, feeling connected to the clients that you're working with even. So what are you hearing, and how do you think about the benefits of connection at work?
There's a moment it takes me to, Miriam. I was 21 years old. I was president of the student association at Carleton University. You know, thinking like I'm a big boss now. I'm the leader. It's a big organization. I'm way in over my head. Don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, 150 staff, $8 million. And like, there's a particular moment. I'm just finished trying to negotiate with a vendor new agreements and contracts for the businesses that we run for the student bar. And I don't like how the negotiation is going. I'm sort of fighting with the person. I'm going back and forth. I don't think they're being fair. My staff who'd been there longer go, no, that seems reasonable. I'm pushing. And like we're going back and forth. And I leave that meeting unsettled. And I walk across from the one building we're in, across to the other building to where our student offices are. And I'm just in my head. I'm like, you know, when you have an argument, you're just ruminating in your head. I'm ruminating in my head. I walk through that front office. And one of our staff, who's the office administrator, you know, says, "Hi, Fahd, like, good morning." And I don't say good morning back. I don't say hi. I'm in my head. I just walk right through. Honestly, I didn't even notice. I didn't even know she said good morning. I'm like, walk right through. I walk right to the back office. I'm sitting there and I'm ruminating. I'm just like frustrated. And like an hour later, one of my student executives, colleague of mine, friend of mine, David, comes over and he goes, "Hey, what happened with Kristen? She seems pretty upset." I'm like, "I don't know what happened." He goes like, she said hi to you and you ignored her. I was like, I don't know when she said hi. You know, I walked in. I was like, crap. So I like walk back out and like I go, "Oh, hi, Kristen. Good morning." And she says hi, like, you know, like casually, and I can tell she felt a certain type of way. The accumulation of this is like when I was so busy in leadership roles trying to do the work, I so often forgot about the relationships to the point where, and I don't think I've shared this with you before, I almost got impeached in my first year as student president. And not the results I got. I like turned the organization around. But here I was like, during the impeachment, some of the like things that came up was like, yeah, Fahd can be a tornado. Fahad's not always like, you know, available to staff. And I think there was a part of me, the entrepreneur in me, the tech entrepreneur who like loved the stories of the Steve Jobs and the Elon Musk, the chaotic, brilliant entrepreneur who willed their way into getting results. Not realizing that Steve Jobs lost his company. Yes, he was removed from Apple. Elon Musk lost his company, X.com, which was PayPal. Like these leaders actually failed in their leadership because of the inability to have effective relationships. And over the years, that little moment of like, "Fahd, you didn't say hi in the morning," has stuck with me as like just how important that hi in the morning is from a leader. And it's stuck with me to the point where, you know, I still make the mistake so often. Don't get me wrong. I'm still a very results driven kind of entrepreneur who's trying to get to the next thing and but it is what I look for, the micro interactions now in teams when I'm sort of assessing how well a team gets along.
You're listening to this podcast, so I know you've got a curious mind. Here's a helpful fact you might not know yet. Drivers who switch and save with Progressive save over $900 on average. Pop over to Progressive.com, answer some questions, and you'll get a quick quote with discounts that are easy to come by. In fact, 99% of their auto customers earn at least one discount. Visit Progressive.com and see if you can enjoy a little cash back. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. National average 12-month savings of $946 by new customers surveyed who saved with Progressive between June 2024 and May 2025. Potential savings will vary.
I love that for so many reasons, so many of which we'll get into in terms of the power of those micro moments, in terms of how to not only spot them and take advantage of them, but encourage other people to notice them and lean into that as well. But part of what I'm hearing in your story is the same shift in the narrative that I'm seeing across the board in terms of different leaders and different organizations and different industries, and just anecdotally how we're thinking about friendship and connection at work, where previously a lot of us, myself included, even studying friendship, I think have been very primed to think of connection as being at odds with productivity, with efficiency, with success. And instead, what we're seeing is that not only does it feel good, of course, to have close connections and supportive colleagues and true friendships at work, not only does it feel nice to have that micro moment of hello or a check-in in the morning, that's actually the thing that creates sustainable workforces, that creates high-performing teams, effective leadership across the board. That is the thing that drives productivity and efficiency and retention and all of the outcomes that both employers and employees care about.
You can efficiently do the wrong things. You can also burn people out through efficiency. And I think the reality is, and we say this to leaders all the time, like if you focus purely on the efficiency in the job, you are focusing on the lowest level of leadership, which is the positional leadership. And so we know fundamentally that the second level of leadership, according to some of John Maxwell's work and according to a lot of research, but it's relationships. It's like, that's that you want to be a leader, you want to get the most out of people, you cannot purely focus on efficiency, which is just the pure in and out kind of hour in, hour out. Especially in collaborative environments, especially in creative environments, in knowledge-based environments, especially when it's not just like, I need you to crank as many screws as possible, which is very machinery type work. Someone can make an argument in the Amazon warehouses that less friendship would keep workers faster. Sure, until they don't want to be there anymore, in which you then have attrition and you've got to have to deal with the attrition. It can keep workers faster, but it doesn't necessarily make workers want to solve problems. It doesn't want to make them take initiative. It doesn't want them to be empowered. I'm just going to do as I'm told, and I'm going to stick to that. And this is the challenge of like high performing teams, and the challenge of leadership is like, how do you get a group of people to be performing greater than the sum of their parts? And you can't without deep relationships.
So let's break down some of the language that we're using here before we really get into the nuts and bolts of it. When we're talking about workplace friendship, and what's so interesting is very often when we're talking about workplace connection or workplace friendship, we find it important to add that qualifier at the beginning. Oh, this is a work friend. Oh, we're talking about workplace connection, as opposed to we're talking about friendship and connection that potentially happens in a work context. So I'm curious from your perspective, what are we talking about when we use those labels of a work friend or workplace connection? Is there some nuance that's important for us to be thinking about? And what is that?
I don't know. Miriam, I'd flip that back to you. Like, we have context-based friends. Like, I have sports friends. I have like school friends. I have my like entrepreneur friends, and like they're in their groupings. And I think the context-based friends, I guess the question is, most context-based friends don't survive beyond the context, right? So if I leave that work, am I still friends with them? Or am I only friends within that context? I think that's, your work here on like levels of friendship with people and depth of friendship. But I think that what we've seen, and Gallup kind of really popularized this question for a little while, which is like asking the question in employee engagement surveys, which is like, I have a best friend at work.
Yes.
And when we started asking that question, adding it to some of our team dynamics pieces, we got a lot of pushback. Well, why does that question matter? I have a best friend. I don't have a best friend at work. I have friends. Okay. Interesting qualifier. Like, because you're just going to claim everyone as a friend. So I think what's interesting about workplace friendships is it makes you, just like as a kid going to school, makes you want to go to work.
Yes.
Like I believe in the importance of purpose and like driving meaningful work, but I don't think anyone dreams of labor. Like I think, like I am someone who's passionate about my work. I am passionate about people finding their purpose in life, leaders finding work that is meaningful. But the question is like, if you had all the money in the world, what would you do? I don't know if we dream of labor. We dream of leisure. We dream of creativeness, art. Maybe we do art, maybe we'd write, maybe we'd teach, I think like for people to want to be at work and to believe that the work that they're doing has impact, they need to have friends who they're doing it with. It's like when I go running and I run with a friend, I'm more happy. When I work out and I work out with a friend, I'm happier. When I go for a meal and I have a meal with a friend, I'm more excited. Like if I go on a trip I want to share my trip with a friend. Like anything we do, we want to share it. When I'm training for my marathon, I want to tell my friends about
So sorry.
it.
How many minutes are we into this interview that we had an over under on? How quickly you would bring this up? I hear what you're saying though. The friends that we have, and maybe it's not even friendship that we're talking about yet. Maybe it's the close connections, the supportive connections. Those influence that we show up at work, that we're willing to, that we are able to, and they influence how we show up, that we are present, that we are engaged, that we are happy, happier and healthier for that matter. I have this language that I sometimes like to use when thinking about friendship and thinking about contextual friendships, of the difference between circle and square friends. And square friendships are the ones that check a box. They are context dependent. And as you said, you gave all of the prime examples. This is a work friend. This is a gym friend. This is a parent friend. This is a travel buddy, maybe, the friend that I go on trips with. That can be different from circle friends that may or may not be concentric, but there it's really about expanding the borders of that friendship. And those friendships are not based on context. They're based very often on depth and that feeling of this person really knows me. They know multiple aspects to me in multiple areas of my life. So potentially it's the depth that separates them. But I also think, to your point, it's that piece of, if we remove the context, I believe that this is somebody that I will still be connected to, or at least want to stay connected to. And that's not only contingent on context or external forces that are kind of keeping us together. And that's not to say that those square friends or contextual-based friendships aren't valuable. They certainly are. And very often, it's not necessarily the case of like a square peg, round hole. Like, we can have both. And I think that's a little bit of what we're talking about when we use that language of best friend at work. That yes, this is context specific. You met through work. A lot of your discussions probably relate to work. You're maybe collaborating on shared projects, and there's something else going on where you feel like this person is just a little bit closer to you, and you know them, and you would choose to be connected even if you weren't collaborating on this particular project. Yeah. I want to talk about high-performing teams. You used this language earlier. And so, part of my question is, your expertise lies in creating and fostering and encouraging these high-performing teams, both from supporting leaders who are themselves responsible to a large extent for supporting those teams, and supporting the team members themselves who are co-creating that high performance. What does it mean to be on a high-performing team? What makes a team high-performing, and how does this kind of apply to our friendship?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's start with, I like to give it a math equation so that we can sort of categorize teams. Oversimplification, but it's sort of an easy model. The high-performing team model we use is, we ask ourselves the question is, why is it some teams are greater than the sum of their individual parts, while some add up to be less? Okay, so team of 5, are they equal to 5? 5 people, 5, right? A team, or are they less than 5? Or are they greater than 5? So when they come together, do they create more? So we say most teams that are 1 + 1 = 2 teams. They're equal to the sum of their parts. That's where they start, right? You and I we're working together. I do my part, you do your part, and we hand it in. Like,
this sounds a little bit like the shared group project in high school, right? Like, let's divide the work and work together and deliver that.
Now, what happens over time is that teams don't stay in a 1 + 1 = 2, because what happens is, if there is no great intentionality behind how we work together and what we'd like to see of each other in terms of expectations, in terms of strengths, in terms of values, we drift. And the drift goes into the 1 + 1 = 0 teams, where you're like, I am literally worse being on this team. Like, I end up producing less than. I either don't care as much, my work gets sloppier, or I'm pulling weight of other people and then I'm frustrated. Like, it is a team that actually starts to produce less than the sum of their individual parts. And the obvious teams are the toxic ones. Like that's obvious, 1 + 1 = 0. Okay, people aren't getting along. There's conflict, there's toxic, it's disrespect. Okay, but then there's insidious toxic. There's the hidden, like we don't talk about that. There's artificial harmony. There's the like avoidance of any difficult conversations. As we all pretend like everything's okay. And when you're stuck in 1 + 1 = 0 long enough, you try and drift back to like the 1 + 1 = 2. But you do so through these sayings we have in society, right? If you want something done right, you do it
yourself.
Ah, interesting, right? Everyone can finish that
was
sentence.
I not supposed to?
No. You are. But that's really that's really it, right? Oh, you want something done right? There's a cost to teamwork. Yeah. And at one point we realized that the cost of teamwork is too high. We go, I don't want it. I'm just going to do it myself. And what happens is we end up siloing. And so we end up at this like in between 1 + 1 = 0 and 1 + 1 = 2. We're not fully even equal to the sum of the parts, but we're not at 0. So it's not that bad. We're like, well, I just do my part and whatever they do. And so then you get this Frankenstein team.
Yeah.
Right.
We've created a tolerable dynamic or situation where it works well enough that we will continue with the status quo that we have now reestablished in some way.
And it's just easier to just keep the status quo. Now, the other teams are the 1 + 1 = 3 teams. They are greater than the sum of their individual parts. I am better for being on this team. Because I'm in this team, my standards are higher. Because I'm in this team, I feel more creative and I can push the standards. Because I'm in this team, I can create something that I would never have been able to create on my own. That coming together allows me to produce something that would have not been possible before.
Yeah.
That's a 1 + 1 = 3 team. And the piece we want to get to is like, what makes those teams? Is it the individual talent in those teams? Is it their shared, like, is it motivations? Is it shared values? Like we get into all of this stuff, and it's been studied in number. Like Google studied it called Project Aristotle, right? And so they studied 180 teams, 2 million data points, 2 years, and now it's famously cited. But it ends up citing that essentially the first conclusion is that the interactions between team members matters more than the individual talent. That's the first conclusion. The interactions between team members. And I think this is where you're getting at a little bit with our relationships and our friendships, is like, how do we interact with micro moments? How do we hold each other up? How do we build each other up? How do we create space for difficulty, for challenges, for conversation? But is there an actual understood interaction and group norm? And so I like to use the analogy of like, you go to your parents' home, you walk in, you know where the fridge is, you go, you make yourself a sandwich, you have a drink, you sit on the couch, you're comfortable, it's your parents' home. But you go to like your friend's home who you don't really know as well, maybe, or your, aunt or uncle, and you go in, you take off the shoes and you're like, you're navigating, you're trying to figure out how you can show up and how you should show up and what couches are you allowed to sit on. And they say, oh, feel free to grab anything, but you don't go grab anything because that's impolite, because the unwritten rule is you don't open someone else's fridge. But when you're at your best friend's house, you go, what's in your fridge? Why you got so many beers here? You don't have enough food, right? Like, and you're teasing them about what's in their fridge. And so what we see with the highest performing teams, the 1 + 1 = 3 teams, is that over time, the culture, the interactions, the expectations have become so clear as to how we want to show up that they're in flow and they are moving towards solving real problems versus navigating the human dynamics of the group. And that's a big split.
I love this. I think this is giving us all a lot of not only language, but a framework for kind of understanding interpersonal dynamics. And yes, absolutely, there's a team building aspect to this. And so whether you're listening and you're thinking about your specific team at work, or you're thinking of individual connections with colleagues at work, I think there's a tie in there. And I also, in hearing you talk, I can't help but think about just platonic friendship and connection outside of work. I mean, we are constantly involved in collaborative exercises with our friends that have nothing to do with work. We're trying to figure out, what our weekend plans are. We are wondering about whether or not we should bring up that thing that bothered us. We're trying to figure out the new established norms of a new dynamic in friendship, and how much should I share or open up or let this person know that I didn't love the way that they just teased me or responded to me or made fun of my marathon training or whatever the thing is, right? What have you learned through your work about how norms get established and how we can kind of move towards that in a, as you said, a flow-like state, and how we can co-create that? What should we all be doing and thinking about, whether it is in a workplace context or in more of those collaborative connections outside of work?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really interesting because there's a lot of like facilitators, including myself, who over the years, have made a business out of like helping teams establish norms. But here's where I've come to is like norms of a group are established in a few orders. The number one order is as old as time and as old as any leadership lesson. The number one order is, how does the leader of the group act? We watch leaders 7 times more than anyone else in our group. And I don't know, and I'd love to hear your understanding of this from like a friendship group too, which is I think interesting. But like in team situations where there's a clear title, leader, that's one. But I always, when they're having team dysfunctions and we're being brought in to help with a toxic team, a team dysfunction, I always ask the manager, I say, who's the emotional leader of the group? Because you might hold the title, but who's the emotional leader? Who's the one that actually is providing the narrative that everyone's actually following? So there's always an emotional leader of a group that's sometimes not the title leader. And we watch that leader 7 times more than anyone else. And 2 things happen. One, they signal to us the type of norms that are okay. That's one. And so we follow those norms, not the values written on the walls and the exercise that we do, but like, what is the leader doing? 2, what do they tolerate? So not just what do they champion, but what do they allow in a group environment? In a situation of a group of 5 or 6 people, if you're the leader there and someone does something that's inappropriate to the group, if you do not correct it, call it in a nice way, you've signaled to the group, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so ultimately what we find for group norms is it's the values you champion minus the behaviors you tolerate.
Yeah.
And so the equation there, it's the values you champion minus the behaviors that you tolerate. And so you can champion a lot of values, but if you tolerate the behavior, and this gets into like some people, tolerate, like that's tough. Like we don't have to, and I would say like, I call people in. I don't call people out. I call people into their best self. Like, you know what, Fahd, I think I see what you're getting there, but I know that your best self would have approached this situation a little bit better. Mm-hmm. Instead of like calling out like, hey, you shouldn't do that, which feels like, attacking, and the person gets defensive and so on and so forth. And so I think like we can write the group norms, we can do the exercise as a team, we can write them out and label them. But at the end of the day, it is what I celebrate and how I show up and how I recognize, and then what I tolerate in those group environments when the moment is difficult. And this is the key piece. There's a little story I tell, and then I'll kind of throw it back to you. I was at the cottage with my nieces and nephews, and we take them to a cottage every year to go swimming and have fun. And every year I give them a big speech around the importance of like environmental cleanliness. Don't throw your garbage in the river. Don't throw your things. Like we need to make sure it's all clean. And we had just gotten to the island. There's a huge dock. And I look over, and my nephew Nasser, 3 years old, looks at me dead in the eyes and throws a bag of Doritos straight into the river. We're just like, and he's like staring at me.
No,
and of course
he's wondering what you're going to do next. Of course,
yeah. And so my niece yells out, Nasser threw a bag of Doritos in the river. And I'm in like a sweater and sweatpants. I'm not in swimsuits. We just got there. I don't. It's extremely inconvenient, and I can't reach over and get the bag of Doritos. And like in that moment, I'm like, if I don't jump in and grab that bag of Doritos, I'm a fraud. Like I'm a fraud. I like everything I just spent the last 10 minutes telling them about the cleanliness, importance of the environment, blah, 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 blah. Uncle Fahd giving us this speech every year doesn't mean anything.
This is important, but only when it's convenient, or only when it's not on me to do something about it. Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's it. And that's the signal there. I take out my phone, I end up jumping in and trying to grab it, and I come out and they're laughing. The kids are laughing. Nasser's not even paying attention. He's now over there, But what happens for the rest of the day is I'm sitting down. Nasser throws another bag of Doritos, of course, because he's 3 years old and doesn't, But now my other two nephews go running in as fast as they can, excited to grab the garbage out of the river.
Mm-hmm.
Our leadership values show up when it's inconvenient. And I think that's the norms. And I think that's true for friendship in ways. Like, it's the friends that you lean on during the difficult times when I'm like, I know this is inconvenient for you, and yet you're showing up for me.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so much interesting crossover here. I mean, I'm always interested in the leadership piece and the workplace piece. And I think that, again, we'll get into some of that nuance and complexity in a second. And I can't help but think about the lessons that we can, again, all abstract to all of our friendships, where when we are entering into a new friendship and building that, we are getting to know someone, and we're also getting to know the norms of that particular friendship. And I call this friendship specificity. And so if we think about something even like, how often do I see or speak to this friend? Or what do we speak about? What do we connect over? What are the activities that we share together? How
is this a texting friend, or can I call them randomly?
Exactly. Yeah. And what happens when one of us has said something that has been misunderstood, or has been unintentionally hurtful, or actually has been a little bit of an intentional lashing out from a place of fear or rejection or fatigue or whatever it is. There is this process that unfolds of, okay, what are they going to tolerate? Okay, how do, have they commented on that? Am I going to comment on this? Am I not? How do I do this? And we might do that differently with different friends for all sorts of reasons. And so I think it's really interesting for us all to be thinking about, how does that process evolve over time? And what am I allowing? And this is where those micro moments become so important, because just like we are often underestimating the impact of a little wave, or a hello in the morning, or the impact of a little birthday celebration, we also overlook the value of moments where someone says to us, or when we say to someone else, you checking in on me just there, that really meant a lot to me. I love that you picked up the phone and called me instead of sending a text or an email. Or, I love that you made this a shorter meeting today because you know that I had something really important to get to. We really underestimate how impactful that type of gratitude and recognition can be in those moments. And so I would imagine that these are some of the things that you certainly talk about in a workplace context, but we can bring that to our friendships outside of work as well, in terms of how are we shaping and rewarding the things that really matter, and how are we saying, hey, I don't actually like that. That didn't feel so good.
And what you're getting to was one of the aspects of these higher performing teams, Miriam, is like, it shifts from accountability and norm setting being a manager to the team to eventually peer-to-peer. So the shift to 1 + 1 = 3, the highest performing teams have peer-to-peer accountability over what they need of each other versus manager to employee accountability. Now, the 1 + 1 = 0 is like, there is no accountability. But the 1 + 1 = 2, it's like, well, I'm waiting for the manager to call that person out. Like, that person's not holding their weight. The manager should say something. But in a peer-to-peer, it's like, hey, Fahd, I need you to step up on this project. Like, we're on it together, and you're just not pulling your weight, or you've missed some deadlines now. Can we talk about that? And that's not a manager. That's a peer-to-peer. Yeah. And so what you're getting at is, once a group really forms, when a group can hold each other to the norms that they've set, that's power. But that is really hard. That takes time. That takes the depth of relationship that goes, I'm not going to lose this relationship if I engage in a conflict situation, which is the fear, right? Even in friendship. It's
yes.
Like, yeah, am I going to lose this relationship? Is the person not going to like me anymore? Are they going to...
But I was going to say, what's so interesting about that is very often the only way to learn that in effect is to have the difficult conversations, is to be in moments of conflict and tension, because you can reassure yourself all you want that, oh, this person likes me. We're true friends. We're not just workplace friends. Yes, of course, we could handle this. There's a different type of confidence that comes from being in a moment of conflict or voicing something challenging, coming out the other side, and then having that confidence come from lived experience, not just a moment of reassurance. And so sometimes that encouraging positive self-talk is the thing that's needed. And then we need to take that further step.
Yeah. And I think that's the hard part. Like I've always said, conflict builds trust.
Yeah.
So when you have good conflict, you build more trust. But you need a certain amount of trust to lean into like a little bit of conflict. And so you see it early on how someone dips their toe into like, I'm going to try and correct this person or mention something I don't like, and let's see how they respond. And I tell leaders this all the time. The moment someone has even an ounce of courage to push back on something, I know you might disagree. And you know what? They might even be wrong. I need you to notice that ounce of courage because it actually took a lot for them to even get to that. They're dipping their toe in. Mm-hmm. And so hear it out. Listen to it. If you disagree, like just chew on it long enough that they felt you chewed on their feedback and didn't just spit it back out and say, let me get back to you on that. And maybe a day later you tell them, you know what, I thought about it. I disagree in the path, but I've heard you. And I think that like, I hear you is what we want from friends. It's what we want from family. It's what we want from, like that to feel heard, to feel understood in a workplace. I think like when we're getting at relationship work and you're getting at friendship work, who are my best friends? The friends who I feel like understand me, who've known me the longest, who've seen my journey, who've seen my glow up, who've seen me go through the difficult times, who I've been vulnerable enough with to go like, yeah, that was a dark moment for me. And I shared with them. And I think that like is the same with teams. We are always asking ourselves, because that 1 + 1 = 3 teams are the teams that don't just do status quo. They take on the most difficult problems. And it's like, who do you want to take on difficult problems with?
Yeah. Well, and I like that you're giving us some very kind of practical language to use here and pushing back on that idea that, noticing is simply a personal internal process. Yes, as whether we're talking about leadership at work or workplace connections or just in our individual friendships, again, that noticing can be an interpersonal process where I am giving that time and space internally. I'm thinking about it. I'm maybe having a moment of appreciation, gratitude internally. But again, I'm making that noticing clear and overt. I saw that you did this thing, and here's what I appreciated about it. Or here's what it made me think of. Or I want you to know that I did think about this, and here's what I'm coming up with now. So I love that you're making this really overt and practical. Let me pivot for a second, because we've talked a little bit about the value and the role of moments of conflict and tension. We've talked about rewarding and encouraging some of these micro behaviors and making sure that we're not tolerating things passively. Coming back to this idea of workplace friendship, one of the themes that often comes up is the role of boundaries. I want close friendships at work. I have people that I could see myself being closer with, and I'd like that. But I don't necessarily feel that I either can do that or should do that, or I'm just not clear on how much I should be opening up or sharing. Are there any specific boundaries that you have found to be really helpful and important in a workplace context when it comes to connection at work?
Yeah, this one's tough, right? Because so every manager is given the advice at one point, don't be friends with your team because then you can't hold them accountable. And my response to that is just, so you just suck at holding people accountable. That's the actual problem, not the friendship. It's like there's two sides to that equation. You just suck at one side of it, and that's your problem. Because if you think about who you're willing to have the most conflict with, it's people who you have closer relationships with, like your partner at home, like you're willing to probably discuss the more difficult things, and the friend who's been the best friend for a while, you're probably more willing to discuss difficult things than the new person. So like actually there should be, and I don't have the research behind this. You can maybe, but I feel like there's a correlation between friendship and conflict, like a willingness to have it. However, it doesn't because there's a skill missing around accountability. And so I'll separate your question into two parts, because I think there's like the peer-to-peer friendships, and then there's like relationships between manager and employees, because I think that there is a power dynamic there, and there is some pieces to kind of really think through. For manager to employee, what I will often tell managers is, one, you should be friends. You should develop relationships. You should get to know them, but you are not their therapist. So at times, manager will be like, man, like, my employee is crying about the breakup they're having during a one-on-one. And I say, then you be a lending ear and you let them process, but you're not giving advice about their like relationship and what they should do. You should take care of yourself, go seek some help, find a therapist, go talk to friends, send them to where they need to be, but be a listening ear. And I think that's where I sort of set the boundary for managers. I say, be the friend, be there when it's difficult, but don't take on the problems, or don't share that you were partying over the weekend and, you were at a rave maybe, and that were doing, certain substances like that. How do we control that? Now, I think at a peer-to-peer level, there's more boundaries you can sort of get through, because we can be more free to share. There is no power dynamic. I think when there are power dynamics, this is the constant challenge. And saying that out loud, I also recognize that the best, highest performing teams are teams that actually lower that power dynamic, where it almost doesn't exist, where there is real equal shared power. Yet you still have someone coordinating and being the quarterback. You still have someone coaching, but there's real shared power, and there's not this. And I think that happens when we are vulnerable. But yeah, I struggle with this one a little bit too. So I'll throw it back at you, Miriam. Like, I think, where do you set the boundaries? Where do you think it's appropriate?
It's interesting because I share a similar hesitation. People will often ask me for, the right recipe. How much exactly should I share, and what is the right, not only amount of disclosure, but type? And there isn't necessarily a clear answer to this. I will say that very often we are getting it wrong because we are so fearful of opening up and sharing. And so very often the message is it's okay to bring a little bit more of yourself to your workplace relationships, regardless of the position that you hold or the role that you are in. Now, I also recognize that that's not always the case, that there are people for whom it doesn't always feel safe to bring their full self to work. And I think that that's a really important conversation. But again, the onus of responsibility then needs to be on the environment and the corporate culture, as opposed to only on the individual to just push through and share more of themselves when it doesn't feel safe. There are also people who tend to be a little bit of a fire hose and anything goes. And I will share about the debauchery that I got up to this weekend. And so sometimes the conversation is let's reel it back in, or maybe let's drip it out slowly so that you can see how people are responding and bring a little bit more intentionality and noticing to those moments. And see how you feel after you've shared all of this. Do you leave feeling overexposed and regretful that you have just shared this part of your life at work that you weren't necessarily ready to share? Yeah. So slowing things down is sometimes helpful, but I do think this is where that piece of specificity again becomes important, because different teams and different organizations have different types of corporate culture in terms of what is permissible or allowable or expected, and we will see differences between teams and between coworkers. And slowing it down, I found one really helpful strategy for people who are wondering, should I share this or not, is to actually kind of ask yourself that in advance. How will I feel if I share this? How will I feel if I share this and other people hear this information? And that is a really important question in a workplace context, where it's one thing, to tell a friend a secret, and like the unwritten rules of friendship are in a lot of cases clear. Oh no, I'm not going to go spill my friend's secrets to other people. At work, those same norms don't necessarily apply. And so if you are choosing to share something that is vulnerable or secretive or sensitive, you either need to be really sure that you have communicated to this other person that this is for their ears only, and that they should not go repeat this. And you need to be very trusting of the fact that they won't, or you need to be very willing to tolerate the possibility that others will hear this information. And again, that's a risk that sure exists in friendships outside of work, but especially early on when we're getting to know people, that is something that we just need to be a little bit more mindful of. It's interesting. We're talking about friendships at work and culture, and you use this language about almost power dynamics and a hierarchy a moment ago, and it made me think of the other language that we often use when talking about corporate culture and workplace experiences and relationships, which is, oh, this is like a family here. This is my work family. This is a family. And I would love to hear your thoughts on this. I mean, I see you cringing a little bit, and I suspect we might have some similar thoughts here. I know from my perspective, I kind of get what people mean when they're using this language. I think very often it's coming from a place of there is a real closeness here, and it's potentially capturing that distinction between, box and circle friends of, oh, these are people that I don't just work with. I actually really like them, and I would choose to be around these people even if we weren't working together in this capacity. But I think that there's a lot of challenges that exist. I mean, first of all, there are a lot of different families, some of which I would love to be adopted into, and others, no thank you, right? There's also the reality that in a family, there is a hierarchy in place, very often one that's based on age or position. And some of that might map onto the structure of your particular organization or team, but not exclusively. And very often, parents aren't turning to their children and saying, I need creative solutions for my tax strategy this year. But can we benefit in a workplace context from approaching the new hires or the younger generations to see what kind of creative ideas they're coming up with? Sure, absolutely. And I think the biggest issue that I have, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts, is sometimes that idea or that language of we're a family is a catch-all for closeness. And sometimes it's a euphemism for, oh yeah, we actually have porous boundaries and a really challenging, conflict-ridden dynamic. And we've all just decided that we're going to tolerate this. And so you should know that we're really close, but we also have a lot of conflict here. So I'd love to hear your take on that language.
Yeah. My like immediate funny response is like, imagine being in a family and then like one day you wake up and like your sister is fired. Like that doesn't work. It doesn't like it just
That's great.
And certain cultures like in my Arabic Middle Eastern culture, you don't quit on family.
Mm-hmm.
And so like, you find a way there's a very collectivist view of like, you sometimes don't do what's best for you, but you do what's best for the family. And there's a real view in like, that. So when this sort of comes up, I sort of think one, like when you say someone's family, you're saying that you're not willing to ever fire them. And it sort of splits your business and sort of says like, what are you building here? And the only person that can really define that is the founder, not the manager, because and in this case, I sort of asked founders, okay, if they're family, like, so you are building a lifestyle business where it's the people first. It's not about the profit, but you want these people to succeed and you're going to invest in them and you're going to coach them and you're going to set boundaries and you're going to help them grow and you're going to do everything in your power to help them actually succeed. That's what you're saying, really. Versus I'm going to say a high performance, like an NBA team. A family. Who's the best? I don't care. I like you, but who's the best? And based on who is the best, and based on a pure meritocracy of best talent and best ideas, those would be the people that I put on my starting lineup. And we will protect them, and we will fight for them, and we will make sure they're psychologically safe, and they're empowered, and all this stuff. But it's about the best. So when people say family, I say, okay, are you choosing between family culture or the best? Because there's a trade-off here. You're going to have to trade loyalty for performance at some point. And that's when you're going to be caught in a contradiction in your values. And as a leader, you are going to seem less honest, less truthful, and less trusted. Because Very clearly, you stated family and loyalty, but now you're choosing based on best or performance. Or you're saying best, but then you're protecting this individual who is poorly performing because they've been here forever. And now you're trading on these values. And so I think like my take on it is, if you have a small business and you want to create a family-like culture, I get it. A business of 10, 15 people, and you want to protect them, and you pretty much are going to protect them and invest in them, and you want them to succeed, and it's not about maximizing, growth and profit. And you probably could hang on to some B players that are doing okay, and you want them to grow, and they never really need to be that amazing. That's okay. You have a nice little country club. That's fun. But if you're telling me you're building the NBA All-Star team, then you need to be clear that your culture is not a family culture. It's that of a performance culture, which means that we will be choosing people based on how they perform and how they show up and how the team that they create. And so I think like that's the first anchor, Miriam, when you mentioned that like is super important to me for people to understand. That's where my brain goes.
Yeah. Well, and again, coming back to that idea of a performance based culture is not necessarily at odds with one that is rooted in connection either. And that's, correct, I think, what we have gotten, what has been lost for a lot of teams and organizations. It's, you're making me think, what are your thoughts on personality hires? That's some language that I often hear. I have a close friend who, by the way, has a great personality, and he described himself recently as a personality hire. Is that something that is that language that you yourself use?
I never want to describe myself as a personality hire. I was going to say,
I'm not insinuating that you've in fact hired yourself due to your personality.
Though as a professional speaker, I think sometimes I'm a personality hire for sure. Like I think people are like, oh, we should hire him because he's got great energy and he's fun and he's got some expertise.
I've heard you speak. The message and the takeaways match the energy. Is not it's not all smoke and mirrors here.
No, I think the personality hire thing is do you want to inject some energy into the team? And people are like, oh, we hire this person because they're more energetic and they can make the team get along more and is more fun. And, you add some energy to the team because the team had no one that was bringing people together. And there are those people. There's the friend who is the social butterfly of the group that brings the group together more often. And they're just the leader of the group and they connect and they bring new people into the group. And so I think you have, less of the personality hire and more of like the connector and the person who does build friendships more easily. Therefore, they're good to throw into a team that is people who are more shy or more reserved to themselves, and that person can help cross-pollinate. And so I think if you think about it from that perspective and it's intentional, I think there's reason for that, and there is power, and there's power in it.
We very briefly at the top of our conversation talked about the transition that a lot of people are experiencing when it comes to hybrid and remote work, and how there are absolutely huge advantages to this type of work, both from a personal and professional perspective, and a lot of opportunities for those micro moments of connection can get lost. And one of the things that I've been really curious about is how can we help people have more of those moments when we're working from afar, when we don't see our colleagues face to face, when we're not going to have those spontaneous run-ins and those water cooler moments. So what have you seen that is working well for people? And what can we do both as leaders and organizations, but also what can we do as individuals to create more of those moments for ourselves?
Yeah. The first answer is a cop-out answer, which is you still need to get people together. We as a team, once a quarter, bring our team together, fly them in and spend time together once a quarter. And I think that's a ritual. That's a friendship ritual. That's a connection ritual. The team knows it's happening. The dates are set in advance. The team knows that we're getting together. We're doing some strategy work, some team development work, and we're just working together for 2 days, once a quarter. And smaller teams can maybe afford that. Big distributed teams, it becomes more and more difficult to do that. But can your smaller team do that? Mm-hmm. And so I think there's this notion that remote work has made us more efficient. And it's like, yes, but you can still efficiently do the wrong thing. You're more efficient at what state, at what cost are we more efficient? We're losing the relationships, we're losing the pieces. So that's number one. Number two, you need to have rituals and rhythms. So your team, we get together on Mondays to talk about the sprint for the week. We get together on Fridays to talk about what we did for the week. And sometimes it's like very project focused. And sometimes it's what'd you do on the weekend? What are you looking forward to? But we've got an hour. We call it the bookends of our week. So the Mondays and the Fridays. And people go, oh, but we did the Friday. Do you need to do the Monday? Yeah, because if Friday was like a social, ends up being half social, Monday can be a bit more focused. But you bookend your week. And so we get the team together. Now, you might not be able to get all, if you got a team of 10 people, 10 people can do that. And people go, well, fine, there's a cost to the meetings. I'm like, it's an hour twice a week, that's okay. And again, it's not always the most productive time. We are talking projects, but it's a key ritual and rhythm that we have. And we do an end of the month thing where we get together and we look at the scoreboards. Again, it's virtual, but at the scoreboard, we do celebrations. What are the things we're most proud of for this month? What are we going to celebrate? And you can't celebrate your own thing. You have to celebrate someone else's thing. So again, and it's people are always like, oh, they roll their eyes at first, and then they love it because we need facilitation. Facilitated relationship gives us the excuse to be the corny self that we all kind of want.
Yes.
And I do that with friends now. Like I'll tell friends that I love them, and I'll tell friends that I miss them, and I tell friends that I needed their energy today. And I think it was just not something I was too mad to say it before. Like with my age, with growing up, I sort of realized, no, I want to speak those things out loud. And I want people to know that and that I feel that and that I needed that. And so I do that with my team. So we have these rituals and these rhythms that force us to speak those things out loud that are probably in the back of our head, but only when we take the time to reflect do we actually have them.
Yeah. You used the word forced before, and I would to some extent push back on that, only because I think the idea, and I know you do this with your people, and I know that you help other people do this so well, that when it's done correctly, so to speak, or impactfully, it doesn't feel forced. It feels like a permission slip.
Yes.
It feels like there's the encouragement that's there, there's the opportunity that's there, and I have just enough support and encouragement and permission from the structure and the leaders, the people around me, to feel like, okay, not only do I want to do this, I can. And and I know that's something that you have worked at in a lot of ways and help people kind of recognize that value.
Yeah, I think Miriam, to your last thought, yes, you're right. It's not forced. It's facilitated. And I think that is the piece that we need. Just a little push. It's sort of like you don't want to go for your run, but once you're on your run, you're happy, And I think a lot of leaders tell me, Fahd, recognition, it feels like relationships, sometimes it feels forced. And I go, maybe it'll feel forced for the first one and the second one. But once you lean into it, you realize that this is natural, this is good, and you'll enjoy it. And just force yourself the first time.
I'm walking back my own life because I actually do. There is something to be said for this in terms of the role that not so gentle nudge plays, because there is an element of I kind of just have to force myself to take that first step. And we see this, in the world of psychology and of therapy when we're helping people to access motivation that might feel lost when we're feeling down or overwhelmed or even depressed. Very often it's hard to get in touch with that sense of motivation or pleasure that we used to have when doing certain types of activities or even self-care activities like, showering, bathing, going for a walk, certainly connecting with friends, whatever that may be. We often feel like, okay, I need to wait for the motivation to kick in. I need to wait for the desire to kick in. I need to wait for that sense of enjoyment or happiness or meaning to kick in before I do it. And actually what we see is that if you can force yourself to take that action, if you can force yourself to go for that walk, if you can force yourself to reach out to a friend, if you can force yourself to give that recognition or celebrate that ritual, very often what happens is that the feelings follow, the motivation follows. And so I've definitely seen this happen with some of the teams and organizations that I've worked with, where when you can support people in taking those first steps, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it doesn't totally feel relaxed in the way that we want it to or expect it to, the feelings do follow, and it can get people stuck very quickly in actually a very encouraging cycle. And it's interesting, sometimes before I'm giving a training or a workshop or a keynote on connection at work, I'll ask people all about the workplace rituals that they experience, that they remember and long for, that they used to practice and no longer do for whatever reason. And I'm always amazed at how much people remember and value those small rituals, the bookends that you're describing, the birthday celebrations, the holiday parties, the monthly book club, whatever it is. I want to talk quickly about this whole idea of a unicorn. So your company is called Unicorn Leaders. And before we kind of jump into some of my questions, tell us, what is a unicorn leader? Where does this come from?
So, okay, it comes from the challenging the idea impact an individual can have. So here's sort of the math and the geeky part about it. When we were starting to explore like what makes high performing teams and what are these teams that are, the best, we sort of started to look at, okay, so talent distribution. There's got to be something to do with like who you have on this team. And so when you look at talent distribution, you fall under kind of some old school ways. You look at talent distribution, it typically follows general distribution, right? This sort of statistical, you've got your best on the right-hand side here, your A players, you've got most people in the average, B players, and then you've got some shitheads on the left-hand side. and
that's the scientific term, by the way. That's how we talk about it in statistics, shithead.
Yeah.
Just to be clear.
I think the like I always joke to managers. I'm like, if someone just came to mind when I said that, you probably haven't dealt with that person. So that's initially you look at that, and then you go, okay, so IQ is generally distributed, weight is generally distributed, Mother Nature's kind of pieces are generally distributed. But wait a second, in business, it's not. Like the best companies are not generally distributed. You have like extreme outliers. You have this like 1% that own 99%, right? Like you have this like extreme wealth concentration. You have the best authors sell like millions of books. And then the rest of us, sell 1,000, right? Like the distribution follows what Nassim Taleb calls like extremistan. Like you've got this like, extreme power law distributions. So then when you look at the impact of employees, not the distribution of IQ, but you look at the impact that an employee has and you start to look at it, there are several studies that have been done. Sackman's engineering study was one. Google redid it in 2014. But they essentially retrace to try and understand, can an individual employee have more than a 2 to 3x impact than someone else? Because based on general distribution and standard deviation, you can't. And so then they started doing the math specifically with engineering, because engineering gives you a scalable piece, if it's a manufacturing belt, well, you can only put so many screws. So Miriam can only be 15% better than someone else if she's that much better. But when it came to like writing code and software that had scalable impact, it was like, wait a second. If you add a scalable impact with a high performer, you had like 4x, 5x, 6x. So they started showing distribution. And then you layer on top additional leverage. Wait, if Miriam has software as a skill, but then she also has budget, then how she distributes her budget is a scalable impact, because capital is scalable. It's a leverage point. Wait, and then if she's a manager and she has 5 people she's in charge of, she has 5x labor. She has a scalable impact. And now with AI tools, where it's no longer just software code, but if someone can use the tool to create more leverage, well, leverage has started to increase. So we've come to understand is that basically there's a power law distribution of the impact of employees, which is like Pareto's law. 20% of your employees give you 80% of your impact, but it's honestly even less than at times. There's a small number of employees that give you disproportionate impact in your entire company, your entire organization. Who are they? Well, they're your leaders. At least that's the bet you've made. The bet that you've made is that you've given this person to be in charge of 15 people and you've given them budget, you've given them direction. You as a company have said that Miriam's 1 hour is worth 15 people, 15 hours. She should be 15x leveraged. But a leverage point is also a failure point. And so those same leaders, if untrained, cost you 15 times more. And so when we got into this, what we called unicorn leaders were these super leaders, were these 10x leaders, were these leaders that had disproportionate impact, that when given leverage, they were able to create scalable impact in their organizations. They shape culture, they shape vision, they make other people better. And so this became this like unicorn leader. It also worked well because in the tech companies that were valued over $1 billion, they were called unicorns. So we're like, while you're building your unicorn company, you're going to have to build unicorn people.
You are a unicorn in terms of your memory for research and relevant studies, in terms of the amount of content that you are able to consume and take in, and not only regurgitate, but kind of offer up in a really meaningful and practical way. For the rest of us that are not unicorns, but are ponies, not even horses, ponies, okay? Tell me in one sentence how we should be thinking about a unicorn leader. What is a unicorn leader?
There are people who make other people significantly better around them. So they have transformational aspects to them. They have this ability to unlock power in other people.
I love that. And here's why I forced your hand. If we apply that same understanding or framework to our friendships, what do you think makes a unicorn friend?
That's tough. So my mind goes to like, oh, they allow you to be the best version of yourself, but they also allow you to be the worst version of yourself. Like
the most real version?
Yeah, maybe
perhaps?
the most real version. They pick you up when you're down, and they help you simmer down when you're too high up, and your unicorn friend has a disproportionate impact in the happiness of your life. And I think that without them, life would be less happy. That you would, that everything you're accomplishing would not feel as meaningful. That everything you're doing would not be as happy because you want to share it with them.
I love that. I love that idea of the disproportionate impact on your happiness and overall well-being in life, because it kind of brings both of those sides together in terms of, yes, the unicorn friend brings out the best in you and sees that and celebrates that and encourages that. Sometimes through a reminder of, you've got this, or here's what the strength that I see in you, or giving you opportunities to kind of lean into that and showcase that in your friendship, or, teaming up to develop those skills together, and is there to both show up in the moments where things are not going as well, and to help you feel seen and supported in those moments, and frankly, to kind of keep you on track sometimes, right? A friend doesn't always need to be wholly positive and encouraging. They can be supportive and still tell us that, hey, I don't like what you just did there, or I know that's not the real version of you, or I know that's not the best in you, and I'm still going to be here. So I think that is just a really interesting way to think about it, and I appreciate you kind of thinking about that question a little bit more deeply and encouraging us all to do that as well. Thinking about that idea of a unicorn friend, who comes to mind for you? What is an experience that you have had in your friendships? Maybe workplace connections, maybe just platonic connections that have supported you with your work even. What's one thing that someone has done that has made you think of them as that unicorn friend?
Whew. That's a good one. One of my friends, Frenna, who I hope she gets to hear this, has been a friend since university. I think as a male, certain female friendships are very powerful because they can allow us to show up in a way where we don't have to own our manhood, masculinity with our other male friends, or be the man of the house that we maybe have to be or feel sometimes in our own partnerships. Like there's this like space of vulnerability that allows us to shed back in a male-female friendship, a truly good platonic friendship that allows us to kind of share and be vulnerable in. And I would say that like as a leader, as someone who leads a business and have a lot of people rely on me, as someone who helps my family a lot and have a lot of people rely on me, as someone in a public figure in ways have a lot of people rely on me, it's like, who's the friend that I can go to and not have to be the one people rely on, but I can just like go like, here's how I'm feeling. I'm just not, here's how I'm what I need someone to like listen to, just to talk through, and like I logically know what I need to do. I just don't emotionally feel it. And so that friend has been since university, has been like a core friend for me, who's always been there, always willing to chat.
And I appreciate you sharing that story, because it makes me, the word that came up for me as you were sharing that was, you said something like, I get to just kind of be. And I think that those friends with whom we can just be and exist, and we don't feel like we have to perform. And the closest, most meaningful, supportive friendships, maybe those unicorn friends, are the ones with whom we don't feel like we have to perform, and that being the best version of ourselves isn't a performance. It's just a lived experience, one that we are kind of moving towards. And I suspect that this is a great tie-in with the workplace environment, where what separates a air quotes, work friend from a friend is one where we don't feel as much of that sense of performance, even when we're in an environment that is so centered on support.
Yeah.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to talk about the proverbial campfire, not only because a lot of your personal experience, leadership experience, comes from you starting this incredible camp for kids many years ago. I know that part of what you do in your work as a leadership expert and a lot of the workshops that you run involves bringing teams and leaders to, an actual campfire.
Yes.
And having retreats where you are encouraging real, meaningful conversations. What do you think it is about that experience that facilitates connection? And if we're not able to literally place ourselves in front of a campfire, how can we create more of those moments and dynamics in our everyday connections?
I think the campfire creates white space where there isn't an activity to do. There isn't something to accomplish. There isn't a meal to finish. It's like, just going to sit around the fire for a few hours, an hour and a half. And like, we don't have a goal. And so what it does is it first starts with the jokes and this story and that story. And if in the right environment, can lead to deeper and deeper conversations that like we don't give ourselves time to get to. Like I've had some of the best conversations with my older brother, who I do work with, and like at the campfire, and it's grounding, and we put more wood on the fire and it's burning, and we're not even looking at each other. We don't look at each other. We look at the fire when we speak. And it's like, It's like I can almost avoid the eye contact and I can just look at the fire. Like, yeah.
So there's this intimacy, but there's also everything else that you're speaking to, which is there is a little bit more of that protection and cocooning. And there is this external force and this external focus that I think can free up a lot of space for processing and thinking. It feels like, okay, we can sit here in silence for longer than maybe I would normally do so, because we're all focusing on the fire. And I know we're all content to do that. So I don't feel compelled to fill the silence. And that then gives me the time that I need to think things through, to slow down and listen better, and to open up and share. And there's certainly those of us who, as extroverted as we may seem or really are, they do take a little bit more time to open up about the things that aren't fully rehearsed or integrated internally.
I think that's like 100% it. If someone fills the space, then I can get away from not having to share. But if the space is held just long enough in a quiet yet reflective, pensive, I might actually lean in. And I think that like, learning that in my own relationships, learning that as a leader, don't fill the space. let them sit in it. Like,
I'm trying my best to not fill the space now, and I think I just failed at it.
different setting. It doesn't count. Yeah.
Well, I look forward to our next campfire conversation.
Yes.
This has been such a meaningful conversation, as it always is. I learned so much from you, and you really encouraged me to think about things in new and interesting ways. One of the things that we do for all of our Ps on our pod who are tuning in is to give them their next connection step, the thing that they can go off and do. And so if there's a listener who is interested in getting closer to people that they work with, what's one connection step that you would recommend to them?
So I teach this trick to leaders. This is my trick or treat. This is bring it home for the Halloween. This is my trick or treat. I tell leaders, the questions you ask most people are boring. Like, how are you? How are this? How are that? You need to find a connection point between you and that person. So you need to find something of shared interest. So your first couple meetings are what I call the rapid fire questioning. Oh, what sports do you play? What movies do you watch? Do you have kids? What you're doing is you're searching for, okay, we both have kids. We both take them to hockey. We both like these kind of movies. You're looking for shared areas of interest, because if I can create a shared area of interest and I can go deeper in that, then I can actually start forming a relationship, and then I'll actually want to share with that person. And so I think, like, some of us, if we're feeling unconnected at work, it's like, what's the thing, not work related, that then another person likes that you like? So we can talk about the show, we can talk about the book, we can talk about plants, and it just becomes our thing. And that thing will extend into other pieces. And so do the rapid fire, find an area of like shared interest, and then bring that thing up almost every time, because it's like, why not? How's that thing? How's your plants? How's the kids? What's hockey like? And people will instantly change. And we used to teach this with kids and teachers. We say, like, a lot of parents would say, like, like, I'd ask my kid, how was school? And the answer is, oh, it's fine. Well, what'd you study? I don't know. I don't remember. I'm like, ask them how recess was. Like ask them about their most interesting day. How was recess? Who played with who? Like, get into that. And then they'll start talking. And once suddenly they're telling you about how recess was, they go, oh yeah, and in math class we did this. And so how was recess? And I think, like, find out your recess and how was your recess and what are you doing with it? I think those are points of connection, and from there it builds.
I absolutely love that. Thank you for encouraging all of us to go out and take our next connection step. And if people would like to learn more about you and the amazing work that you are doing on and off stage and at Unicorn Leaders, where can they connect with you?
Yeah, you can find our website, unicornlabs.ca. You can find us on all social media, Fahd Alhattab. You'll find me on Instagram. I'm there a ton on LinkedIn. And if you just search our work around Unicorn Leadership, Unicorn Labs on Google, you'll find all the different kind of opportunities to connect.
Thank you so much for spending this time with me on office hours. And I'm looking forward to our camping trip.
Yes, that'll be fun. Thank you, Dr. Miriam. Appreciate it.
Isn't Fahd just the best? I find his enthusiasm for workplace connection and culture so infectious. And what's clear to me from our conversation is that we all need and deserve close connections at work. That's true whether it's a best friend we're talking about, a supportive colleague, a manager, a mentor, or a leader. Try as we might to separate the personal and the professional, the truth is friendships at work are so closely connected. The average person spends about 90,000 hours at work over their lifetime, which works out to be about a third of our lives. This is according to Gettysburg College. And this is a big reason why work is actually one of the main places we make new friends as adults. We also know now for certain that having friends, good friends at work, is one of the most powerful drivers, predictors of professional growth and success. In fact, in a fairly recent poll from Gallup, the global analytics and advisory firm, we know that having a best friend at work leads to a 7-fold increase in engagement. And this makes a lot of sense. When we have true connections at work, true friendships, we want to show up. Not only that, our relationships change how we show up. Workplace friendships are not a distraction. They are the secret to success. And I hope after today's conversation that they are in fact the worst kept secret to success. Here's what I'm left thinking about after my conversation with Fahd today. 1, we want to aim for those 1 + 1 = 3 friendships and dynamics, where being in that connection or on that team, it makes you both better for it. And frankly, even our friendships outside of work can operate like a 1 + 1 = 3 team. 2, every team and every friendship has its own set of norms, its own culture. This is what I call friendship specificity. And Fahd helped me to understand that culture is the direct result of the values you champion minus the behaviors that you tolerate. That's why it helps to reinforce positive behaviors, like explicitly letting a friend know, hey, I really appreciate it when you asked me that question, or remembered that important meeting that I had, or gave me that pep talk. And it's equally important to speak up when something is not working or tolerated. Like Fahd said, hidden toxicity is artificial harmony. So here's a friendly reminder. We each have the opportunity to be a connection leader, to be that unicorn friend that has a disproportionate impact on the success, well-being, and lives of our friends. And the best way to step into that connection leader role or that unicorn friend space is to embrace the power that your words have in shaping friendship norms, to encourage the actions that you appreciate and the ones that help you both grow, and to be clear about those that don't support your collective goals and values. And that, my friends, was Office Hours. I'm so glad we got to spend this time together and hope, as always, that it will inspire you to invest in your friendships and the people who matter most. I'll be right back here with you next week for another episode of 2 Peas on a Pod. In the meantime, let's stay connected, shall we? Follow the show on your favorite podcast platform, connect with me at the 2 Peas on a Pod and at Miriam Kermeyer across social channels. And of course, make sure you share today's episode with a friend or an office mate. Until our next catch up, take care of yourself and the people in your pod. I'll see you back here next week. 2 Peas on a Pod is hosted by Dr. Miriam Kermeyer. Executive produced by Zoe Travis, Matthew Hoffman, Katya Kaminsky, and Dr. Miriam Kermeyer. Produced and edited by Podcast Nation. Producers, Madison Britt and Alicia Paneer. Audio engineer, Miles Carter. Original music by Sarah Walk. Created by Zoe Travis and Matthew Hoffman. 2 Peas on a Pod is recorded in Montreal and Los Angeles. Today's program contains information that is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This program is not a substitute for psychological or medical advice. Please seek out your own support and research as needed. Take care, friends.